This is Cornstalks and Sports Talk, your go-to Iowa-based sports show, hosted by the one and only Eliot Clough.
What's up, Cedar Valley, and hello to the Hawkeye State. This is Cornstalks and Sports Talk, your Iowa-based sports show here on and whatever podcasting platform you're listening or YouTube. And I am in such a habit of saying AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com for our Saturday shows that I almost do it every time for these Wednesday or Tuesday midweek episodes of Cornstalks and Sports Talk, your Iowa-based sports show, hosted by me, Eliot Clough, at Eliot Clough on Twitter. Before we get started, make sure that you leave that rate and review on Apple Podcasts. You subscribe, follow, wherever you're listening. Make sure you are able to listen to every show that we post. It does help us out a lot if you do either one of those things or both. And if you're listening on YouTube, please subscribe, like, drop a comment. Tell me if you think I'm an idiot for anything that I say today, or if you agree or you want to give a shout out to any particular player that we talk about or what have you. But today it's going to be another UNI-focused midweek episode again. As a UNI insider for Town Square Media, Eliot Clough. This is my beat, you know. And Wednesday we try to make those a big emphasis, unless we're able to get David or Sean Bach or Nick Osen on and talk a little bit more about Iowa and Iowa State. But this has been too big of a week for UNI to just move past it and move on to some of those bigger FBS programs or major programs, Power 5, Power 6 programs in basketball. And, well, I think we have to talk about it, even though with the pain that it comes with for the UNI fan base, with what happened on Saturday in the Dome against South Dakota State. Number one, South Dakota State, for that matter. We all knew that there was a lot riding on this game. UNI's playoff hopes sort of swinging in the balance, and even with a close loss, like what happened, just a 3-point loss on that last-second field goal against the Jackrabbits, UNI fell out of the FCS stats poll in just even receiving votes. Didn't receive any votes. I think they got 8 in the coaches poll, but the coaches poll is essentially irrelevant. And so it's crazy, because if they won that game, they're probably going to catapult themselves into the rankings, probably in that 20 to 25 spot, especially after beating Southern Illinois the week prior. But they lose on the last-second field goal to the number one team in the country, and they don't receive a single vote after that. Not one. And that is just, it's just beyond crazy to me. No, I'm not going to look at the FCS stats poll and say, who do you remove? I think that's pretty quick and easy to do. A lot of these FCS conferences, other than the Big Sky and the MVFC, have one or two good teams, maybe not even that. I mean, you look at the Pioneer League, they're not going to move up and beat anybody, really, in the MVFC. Maybe Western Illinois. Like, if we're being honest, sure. We'll give them that, but that'd be the only D1 win Western Illinois would get. But anyway, I guess that's pretty telling. But this was a loss that was heartbreaking for a lot of reasons, including that fact that they may have just lost their playoff hopes by losing to the number one team in the country by 3 points on a last-second field goal. Anyway, there are a few positives to take away that I want to address, but before we do that, let's look at the entire body of this game. And you could frame it as a positive too, because of how many negative things happened in this game, with it still being a 3-point game at the end and UNI just barely losing. I want to start off by talking about some of the things that maybe are overshadowed because of the close loss, and then also the fact that well, it was still a good performance, but there are a couple things that happened during this game that have gotten overshadowed because of the overarching narrative of the loss and then the leaping call. Of course, we'll get to that, but there are several things that went wrong. The drops by the UNI receiving corps. Deion McShane had 4 or 5 drops, if I remember correctly. He did have that great catch on 4th down, that over-the-shoulder that was behind him catch from Theo Day, which Coach Mark Farley almost never goes for it on 4th down, but when you have an offense like the Panthers do, you kind of have to in that situation, right? And again, what I want to say here before I guess I go any further on these drops and some of these negative things that happened is the players would agree with me. on this. This isn't me criticizing these guys and being out of bounds and saying, oh my gosh, they were terrible. Each one of these guys, Deion McShane, Logan Wolf, Sergio Morency, who had drops on Saturday, and big drops at that, know the stakes of those drops, and they would take accountability for it too. That's just who these guys are. So this isn't me jumping out and saying, oh my gosh, you're the reason they lost, because it's not true. It's a variety of things. But Deion McShane had several drops, one on third down. It would have been a 3-and-out. It was a 3-and-out. And Theo Day had to throw the ball across his body on an out to Deion on like a 3rd and 2, and instead of running the ball, which that was, Bodie Reeder's been a phenomenal play caller, but that was a little strange. Next, Logan Wolf and Sergio Morency both had both had one drop, if I remember correctly. I don't think that those stats are kept on the UNI website. I'd be pretty surprised if that was the case. Each had one drop that resulted in an interception for Theo. Theo hasn't just thrown a straight-up pick since the game against Indiana State on October 1st. I don't think you can hold those plays against Theo at all, because they hit Logan Wolf in the hands. He hit Logan Wolf in the hands. He hit Sergio in his hands, and that pick off Sergio's hands, he knew it. And again, this is not to add to the level of being upset that these players have. They know it. They have that accountability. This is just facts. These are things that happened and that have added up to what was eventually a loss to the number one team in the country by 3 points. So we'll move on to the next thing. The drops obviously hurt. I think it's had to be close to probably 7 or 8 total drops on the day, maybe even more. But then you look at sacks, just the statistical sacks for both teams. UNI had 0. South Dakota State's 5. It's going to be really tough to win win football games when the opposing team has 5 sacks and your team has 0. And granted, it's going to be tough in general when you don't have Christian Boyd, when you don't have Caden Hoteling. That's going to be tough to rack up any sacks, really. They got 2 quarterback hits. That was it, Cannon Butler and Javon Brecky. But you gotta put some pressure, right? And I mean, I think they did to a degree, right? To a degree, you have to say that, correct? Because you got Devin Rice on one side, Cannon Butler on another. Then you had Jack Krebs and Carter Hewitt, I believe it was, playing the other defensive tackle position in there with Krebs, with Christian Boyd out, which he played well. All 4 of those guys played well. They did great against the run game for the most part. Isaiah Davis, he was Isaiah Davis, right? The running back for South Dakota State, arguably the best running back in the country. He's a bruiser, and we saw that. And earlier in the season, it would have been a lot worse. With the tackling against Isaiah Davis, it would have been a lot worse. And not to say that it was bad, because I would say that was probably the best performance they could have had against a running back of that caliber. I think that's fair to say, and it was a good performance, especially in the second half. Just the one touchdown in the second half, if I remember correctly, and that 2-point conversion, yes, and then that field goal at the end. But they held them scoreless for 26 minutes of gameplay. Like that is UNI defense to a T. The first half, not ideal. First half, not what you wanted. Of course, they got that field goal at the end of the first half too, which, that adds up now towards the end of the game. But 26 minutes scoreless against the number one team in the country, that's pretty damn good. That's UNI football. That's UNI defense right there. And unfortunately, it didn't work out for them. But UNI football probably would have needed 1 or 2 sacks in there, and then maybe another turnover to help them out in that turnover margin. But with those 5 sacks that happened from South Dakota State, 3 of them were defensive tackle Caleb Sanders, and that resulted in 49 yards lost. So that's going to affect the ultimate result of the game. And then SDSU had way more rushing attempts, 10 more rushing attempts to 39 to UNI's 29. The Jacks had 164 yards on the ground. UNI had 88. That is a product of a couple things. Obviously, the sacks and the lack of rushing yards are indicative of how good the South Dakota State defense is. Give them credit. Sure, give them credit. But the passing on 3rd down and 2, that's an indication that maybe you put the ball in your running back's hands a little bit more. Maybe you hand it off to Vance McShane. Maybe you hand it off to Dom Williams, who Dom Williams just scored 4 touchdowns in one game. Vance had that touchdown that it looked like he was going to get up the middle and get stuffed, and he bounced it to the outside for 34 yards and a score. And it was the first touchdown of the game. It's just a couple play calls that are confusing and a couple opportunities to get a first down or to keep a drive going where there was a pass and it was incomplete or what have you. And so there's a couple differences, a couple issues there that would have helped the running game for UNI. Secondly, I guess to address the interceptions again. So secondly, SDSU had 2, UNI had just 1. And to revert back to Theo Day going off the hands of Logan Wolf and Sergio Morency, Benny Sapp, that didn't happen to Benny Sapp. Benny Sapp flew over when he saw Mark Gronowski where he was throwing the ball and hauled in an interception. That was super athletic, super indicative of how good Benny is. Of course, we all knew that going into this season, and now the stats are starting to back it up. He's getting some great tackles and having interceptions like he did on Saturday, and I still maintain that he is one of the best safeties in the country, if not the best safety. He's up there. And he should be he'll get, in my opinion, he should get drafted. Stats don't necessarily jump off the page for this season, but you just look at what he's done on the field as intangibles. That guy's an NFL player. Like there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Next, 10 of 17 on third down was SDSU to UNI's 4 of 12. And again, this comes down to a variety of things. This comes down to, I think one of the interceptions was on third down. Maybe they both were, for all I know. I should go back and look at that. But the sacks that happened on third down, there are a couple. That last one on the last possession for UNI, Caleb Sanders just went right up in the middle and got a 10-yard loss to make it 4th and 16 or 4th and 14. When it was 3rd and 4, Theo got sacked. Man, I'd have to go back and watch the tape. I assume they ran a stunt and Sanders was able just to get around whoever was blocking on the interior, but you got to be prepared for that in that circumstance. You got to be conditioned for that in that circumstance to protect your quarterback in that moment. And again, the pass across Theo's body to the sideline into Dion's hands that goes out of his hands. You can't go 4 of 12 on third down and expect to beat the number one team, the number one team in the country. You just can't expect to do that. And then lastly, as we're talking about right here, the things that added up to result in an SDSU win over UNI in the Dome on Saturday, South Dakota State had 33 minutes and 36 seconds of time of possession to UNI's 26 minutes and 24 seconds. So many things had to go wrong for UNI and had to go right for SDSU, for the Jackrabbits to win the game in the Dome, and that's just what happened. And to look at the entirety of the game and say that UNI didn't play up to par or didn't play like themselves, I think there's some to that. There's some validity to that. But then again, this is the number one team in the country. They make stuff like this happen. This is how they win so many games, especially in the Missouri Valley Football Conference. This is how they win so many games and beat North Dakota State and almost beat Iowa in Iowa City. So give credit where it's due. But at the same time, there are things that UNI could have fixed to win that game and to therefore essentially be a lock for the playoffs. We'll see. They got a bye week now, and they play South Dakota, which isn't going to be a fantastic opponent not this coming Saturday, but the 19th. So we'll see. We'll see how it shakes out. But again, you flip one or two of those stats, and UNI, I think they take that game almost with ease. I was talking with some of the guys in the press conference at the game, not the press conference, the press box at the game, and like I always do, one of our guests, Ethan Petrick, and I shooting the breeze right during the game, not really talking about the game at hand, but not just Ethan, but a few of us were like, wow, UNI could be up 2 scores right now. They could be up 3 scores right now if they converted on some of these third downs, if the interceptions weren't tipped, if these sacks didn't happen. These interceptions, we talked about it with Matt Tollefson last week when we previewed the game, that South Dakota State game. He said, we were talking about the turnover margin being huge. UNI had 1, SDSU had 2. That's a really frustrating part about Benny Sapp making that play, like I mentioned, and then those 2 passes just falling into the lap of the Jackrabbits. because those don't happen, and UNI very well wins the football game almost outright. I mean, SDSU just really lucked into that one in a variety of ways. Now, with all those stats, I mean, the UNI defense in the second half was just completely phenomenal. What did I just say? 26 minutes? 26 minutes without a score from the number one team in the country. That is pretty damn good. That is a UNI defense, man. That's Spencer Cuvalier. That's Bryce Flater. That's Benny Sapp. That's Devin Rice, and obviously the sacks didn't come for Devin or for anybody on the team this weekend, but it was just a vintage Coach Farley defense, and if the offense is just a little better, they win the game. UNI wins the game. And I think UNI fans, I think UNI media is all on the same page right there when they say that. I think the players would agree with you. I mean, Gronowski had 5 fewer completions. 5 more completions? Yes, 5 more completions than Day. Sorry, my notes were wrong. He had 5 more completions than Theo Day, and Theo still passed for 7 more yards. There's the drops. There's the interceptions. I mean, I don't think you can fault Theo at all for that game. Some of the throws that kid makes. I mean, I almost sound like I'm fangirling over Theo. We talked with him last week. If you missed it here on Corn Stalks and Sports Talk, you can go back and listen. But Theo is making incredible throws right now. That touchdown pass to Desmond Hudson up the seam on Saturday, like what? And the catch by Desmond too. Like Desmond has just ascended this wide receiver group and become a contributor right away in his first year in his transfer from Iowa. He's right there competing for snaps with Logan Wolf and with Deion McShane and with Sergio Morency. And I mean, I'm just flabbergasted at how good Hudson has been and how good Theo has been on the run, putting that ball in a tight window. He just does it over and over again. And you see why he was a 3-star recruit and the number 1 quarterback in the state of Michigan in his senior year of high school in that class. So, and I mean, and again, you look at SDSU, some of the big plays for them offensively, Isaiah Davis, he did have a few big plays, and Tucker Kraft with a couple big catches, that one again up the seam for 57 yards where he was wide open. Benny Sapp having to get in there and make the tackle. So, that's, we're looking at all these different facets of the game. And to bring it all together, we got to talk about that last 2:17-ish, right? I mean, of course, UNI had a chance, about 4:41 to go. Theo trots in for that touchdown on the run option. And then the UNI defense comes on and forces SDSU to punt after 5 plays. UNI gets the ball back with 2:17 left, and then they went 3 and out. There was an incomplete pass to Vance McShane in the flat, if I remember correctly. Desmond Hudson caught a 6-yard pass, 3rd and 4, and then Theo gets sacked. And it's a 10-yard sack on 3rd down when it was, like I said, 3rd and 4, which not ideal. Noah Pettinger comes in, freshman, walk-on punter, boots it 41 yards to SDSU's 42, which it was a low snap. He's a freshman walk-on, and you're putting him in this situation, and he very well could have fumbled that snap. He very well could have had it blocked, but he got it off. And this is where another thing factors in. Jaden Yonke returned that punt 19 yards to UNI's 41. 21 yards? Stats might have been wrong there. He returned that punt 19 yards. You have to make the tackle right away. And granted, you want Noah to get that ball up in the air more rather than be a line drive to Yonke. But you have to make those tackles. And this happened other times in the game. Yonke had another couple pretty solid punt returns. I mean, and so it's like, oh, okay, game's over. They got it in UNI's territory right away, and then you're going to give it to Isaiah Davis, and he's going to get yards because he is a powerful freaking runner. But that's not what happened. I mean, I guess what I just said is what happened. Isaiah Davis ran the ball a few times. There's an illegal substitution on UNI. And then Stig calls the timeout with 4 seconds left. And the kick is no good. There's 3 flags on the field. Prior to this play, coach put Sergio Morency in behind the line to try to see if he can get up and block the field goal, right? I mean, you see stuff like that in last-ditch attempts to win games, tie games, block field goals, whatever. And you could see Spencer Cuvalier directing him what to do in that moment. And rather than going straight up, what Sergio did was he jumped forward. And he landed over the line, and the refs called for leaping. Leaping, not a penalty call you hear a lot or basically ever. I might have heard it once or twice in that circumstance, but at the end of the game, when that happens, refs are looking for it. If that happened, I don't know, in the middle of the third quarter, in the middle of the second quarter, nobody's calling leaping. But it happened at the end, and the refs were looking for it. And granted, what fan, what person other than those refs is thinking, oh, I wonder if I need a call, or if there's going to be like a leaping call here? Nobody. To make that call in that circumstance sucks. Especially when it's a tie game, 4 seconds left, and the guy misses the field goal. And the UNI team, I mean, for a moment, they thought they had it. They thought they had overtime. And who knows what happens in overtime if that call isn't made. And, I mean, when was the last time you heard that leaping call? When was the last time? Prior to Saturday, when was the last time you heard a call for leaping? I think mine is like 2004 when the Colts played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa. Seriously. When does that happen? Who is looking for that besides these referees? Also, these officials are just awful. I don't know, and SDSU is saying the same thing. Lots of holding penalties missed. Every single game. And like this just happens over and over and over. The officials are dictating what happens in these games. I mean, against Illinois State when that pass interference wasn't called on Quan Hampton, are you going to hold... Either you dictate how the game goes at the end and you call stuff the same way through the whole thing, or you don't hold the flag because it's late in that circumstance. If that's going to apply on a pass interference, it should apply on a leaping call. You hold the flag because it's late and you don't want to affect the game as an official. You can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. What are you going to do? Which one? And I mean, if it's egregious, then fine. But, I mean, it seemed pretty freaking egregious to me when Quan didn't get that call. And, I mean, it's risky in the first place for Coach Farley to do that, right? Like, for Sergio to not really know, but winging it, right? And to my knowledge and to what it appeared to me, I don't think Sergio really even affected the kick. I think Dustman just missed it on what was, I think, a 34-yard field goal, which became a 26-yard field goal. And so, I mean, what I want to say to UNI fans here, and maybe an SDSU fan if you're listening, SDSU came after some UNI fans on Twitter and me for writing an article saying that call was controversial, which it was. Given the circumstances, given the fact that leaping is never freaking called, given the fact that the number one team in the country came to the Dome and very well could have lost, that's a controversial call. That's what it is. I'm not apologizing for the title of my article. I don't think they want me to apologize, but trying to clown me for that, nah, not going to happen. Come to my mentions, SDSU fans. Yeah, I ignored all of them for a reason. Like, it's just kind of a joke to think that that's not controversial. And then some a TV reporter who doesn't even follow me thinks he's calling me out for this. This podcast isn't about me. I apologize. But I find it really annoying And so, UNI fans, if you had anybody from SDSU come after you and say you're whining or that it's an obvious call, you're fine. It's BS. This is the number one team in the country. They think they're untouchable. Don't listen. It's a joke to me to feel like you need to come after a fan base who is supporting a team that was playing the number one team in the country and almost won. Like, I just think that's a joke. Anyway, Dustman made that second field goal attempt, and Jacks win. We'll talk more about the USD game when it approaches, but wow, I mean, this one just has to sting for the UNI fan base and for the players. I mean, Coach Farley said it himself. He said it's going to take a couple days to get over, and Coach Farley isn't like that. Coach Farley is very much on to the next game kind of guy. That's who he is, and he said it burns, and we're going to sit with us. It's going to burn for our team, too, over these next 2 weeks where we have this bye, and so we'll see what happens. For those of you who didn't see my tweet, Caden Hoteling probably going to be a no-go at South Dakota, and Christian Boyd may very well be out as well. He told me pregame that he thought he'd be back for that South Dakota game, but turns out that might not be the case. I don't know. We're gonna see what happens. Additionally, before we move on, obviously, UNI's playoff hopes for football looking bleak. We'll see what happens over these next 2 games, or 2 weeks rather, and I'll keep you updated on Twitter. It's at Eliot Clough if you want to see what teams need to lose for UNI to get back in that top 25, because a lot of things are going to have to go right for them to make a playoff appearance. Their only real marquee win or key win this season was against SIU. Other than that, they have losses to number 1 team, number 2 team, and Air Force. So good losses, close losses, some of them. And then Illinois State and North Dakota. North Dakota is probably going to be a playoff team too. Illinois State, not so much. But we will we'll see how that shakes out. Last thing, one player from UNI that was on the roster this year that I've talked about a little bit on Corn Stalks and Sports Talk. I think this was last summer. Peter Udoybach. He was a transfer from Minnesota. He's a preferred walk-on with the Gophers and then transferred to UNI because he wanted to get some time on the field before he left. Was a second-string guy coming out of camp, and then he was moved to the third string in that wide receiver group before the season really started. Wasn't happy with that. This is my understanding from that point in time. I haven't revisited it in a while because Udoybach hasn't seen the field. So he's amongst a really talented group too. So he's decided to enter the portal is what I'm getting at. Peter Udoybach, former wide receiver for UNI, just for the fall semester. He came in and now he's back in the portal. So he could be at his third school in a year. But best wishes to him. I mean, I never really got to talk with him much while he was at UNI, but I really thought he was going to have a real chance to compete for a job, but this wide receiver group's just absolutely loaded. So, I mean, even next year, I thought he would, if he stuck around and stayed as a grad assistant, he could really have a shot at getting some time on the field with Dion and Quan graduating, and who knows what's going to happen with Logan Wolf. So we'll see what happens there. Anyway, let's transition here to some basketball as we're about half an hour in on Corn Stalks and Sports Talk. You know how much I could talk about UNI as a UNI insider for Town Square Media. But by the way, we have that recap of the game and the recap of the game last night for UNI basketball on the KCRR, KOEL app and website. They're on all of our local Town Square Media websites. So UNI coverage, you're going to get it there. We're going to get recaps. We're going to get previews. We're going to get some interviews here and there with these athletes from Corn Stalks and transcribed and put into articles and stuff like that. So your UNI coverage is going to be brought to you by Town Square Media and me, Eliot Clough, at Eliot Clough on Twitter. So let's get to basketball. Of course, last time we really talked about UNI basketball was that 2023 recruiting class. National Letter of Intent signing day is tomorrow. UNI is going to land RJ Taylor, Kyle Polk, and Wes Rubin officially, adding to that 2023 class. I think we talked a little bit about Matt Reed being a possible addition to the 2023 class before Rubin committed. Well, Reed had committed to Richmond, and then he just decommitted last week, and then again committed to Tulsa. So he's a 3-star guy that is going to be playing for Tulsa. UNI rounded out that class. They didn't have any scholarships left, so they couldn't go after him to get 2 guys that decommitted. He would have been really fun to add, and I think he would have played right away in Cedar Falls, but 2023 class still really, really solid. Big fan of RJ Taylor. Of course, we've had him here on Corn Stalks and Sports Talk, and Kyle Polk and Wes Rubin. I'm really excited to see what they do in a Panther uniform. Now, for UNI basketball, as it stands here in the year 2022, this weekend, UNI is going to take on Richmond, which will be their first Division I competition. That's at Richmond, and then they go to Virginia on the coming Monday, I believe, or Tuesday. I'd have to go back and look. But so far, they had that scrimmage at Wisconsin. Nothing was really, that was very, very internal. I had no idea that was even happening. And then they played Dubuque last week in an exhibition game, and then last night they played Wartburg. So they took that win over Wartburg last night, 105-49 in the McLeod Center. I'm down at that media bench area at most of the home games, so you can always come by and say hi, by the way. I would love to speak with anybody. And Coach Jake talked about it after the game. He essentially said this was more of a complete game. This is what we wanted to see. We wanted to see them come out aggressive on defense and on offense, for that matter. And Bowen Bourne was available to the media afterwards as well. He said this is the most complete game we've seen or we've had in these 3 games so far. And I completely agree. 53-20 at halftime, and 12-5 at the first media break at 15:54. I mean, this was UNI basketball looking like itself. Of course, that first 10 minutes against Dubuque the other night was like, I don't know how this is going to look. Bowen came out looking like himself. Bowen Bourne scored 19 points to lead all scorers. Landon Wolf, 18 points. Really excited to see what he brings to UNI this season. Coach Jake said it last night. He said it before. He sees Landon scoring in double figures for the Panthers this season off the bench. He's really going to be a spark plug for that bench unit. I'm really excited to see what he can do in terms of scoring. And then Titan Anderson, 6 points, 12 boards. I mean, any other game that would have been a double-double because he would have been out there a lot longer. James Betts shot pretty well from deep. Drew Daniel, who saw this coming? I did not. Drew Daniel, 6'7", lights-out shooter from the corner. I asked Coach Jake about his role with the team this year and referenced Trey Burhow being that sort of corner specialist for the team over the last however many years he's been in Cedar Falls. And I just asked, I was like, is Drew Daniel going to fill that role for you guys? Of course, Drew's not going to start, but the walk-on from Dowling Catholic has really evolved his game since he came to UNI. And no, he's not the most athletic guy. No, he's not the fastest guy. No, he's not the strongest guy, but you put him in the corner and he's auto-freaking-matic. Auto-freaking-matic. There was a play where Nate was, I think, dribbling on the baseline and found Drew in the corner wide open, and Bowen Bourne was at half court. He just turned around and did one of these, and Drew nailed it. I mean, Drew's missed a couple in the 2 games that we've seen, but I would love to know the percentage directly from the baseline 3-point shot, because holy crap. I mean, all 13 scholarship spots are accounted for this coming season, but however things shake out in his future at UNI, Drew Daniel should probably end up on scholarship. So it won't be this year, it won't be next year, because all 13 scholarships, like I said, they're accounted for, which you only get 13 at Division I level. But he is showing just how much putting in the work and being in the gym can affect your game, and the work proving itself and him proving himself. Because every game, he's the first guy in the gym putting up shots. Every game. No matter where they're at, no matter if they're at Richmond, whether they're in the McLeod Center, he's always on the court shooting with a manager or something before everybody else. That's who Drew Daniel is right there. That's Drew Daniel. Let me tell you. And I don't know Drew very well personally. I maybe said something to him at Media Day, but I didn't expect him to see the court this year. I mean, Cole Henry's hurt. He had that ankle tweak, but he'll probably be back for Richmond. And then Austin Fife, we don't know when he's going to be back, if he's going to be able to come back. Charlie Miller, Ege Peksari. And so the roster's pretty thin, if we're being quite honest about it. I mean, you got a couple guys that are very clearly the guys on this team that are going to receive a lot of minutes. Bowen, Nate, Trey, James Betts, Titan Anderson, Landon Wolf, Michael Duax. That's 7 deep, where you feel really comfortable about those guys getting a lot of time. And then you get Drew Daniel, and then you got Derek Krogman, who are both walk-ons that are probably going to receive quite a bit of time, at least until Austin Fife is back and Cole Henry is back. In regards to Derek, I think there's a very high possibility that we see Drew get some significant minutes this year just because he is such a good shooter from the corner. And his release is high. It's pretty. He knows what he's doing, man, and the guys have clear confidence in him. Bowen Born wouldn't turn around and do this at half court if he didn't think it was going to go in. Who has a prettier shot, Drew Daniel or AJ Green? I don't know. It's just kidding. Trey Campbell really impressed me last night, too. He's got a midi. He can create his own shot. He's smooth as all get out. Just smooth. Bowen said he always plays at his own pace. He never rushes. And I think that is who Trey Campbell is. You watch him, and it appears to be effortless, and it's always been like that for him. It appears to be effortless, even though he's one of the best players, or he was one of the best players in the state of Iowa, and now he's a starter as a freshman for Coach Jake, and that doesn't happen a lot. Freshmen don't usually come in and play a bunch of minutes unless they're AJ Green or some of these young guys that fill specific roles like Antoine Kimmons or Noah Carter did. And so all of that to say, they looked a lot better. They looked a lot better against Wartburg as opposed to what they did versus Dubuque. We're really going to get that first test. We're going to see that first test against Richmond on Friday, and then, of course, Virginia, who's a top 25 ranked team. Some of these mid-major schools that have good programs like Toledo and I think Towson, and then you're going to see, or they'll see San Francisco and or Wichita State coming up here. I think Grand Canyon might be in that Kansas City thing as well. They're going to have a lot of really good non-conference competition. And then they're going to play in the MVC. That's going to be good. Belmont's going to be good. Murray State's going to be a lot better than what they're predicted. And then you got, of course, Drake and SIU has looked awesome so far. And Bradley, we'll see what happens with Bradley and Rink Mast. But UNI is picked 5th. I would venture to guess that they won't quite. I don't think they're going to be top 5. I'll say that right now. I don't think they're going to be top 5. I'd love for them to prove me wrong, but I don't think they're going to be top 5. And we'll see. I mean, if Drew Daniel, again, Drew Daniel's the GOAT at this point on the Corn Stalks and Sports Talk Iowa-based sports show. He's really impressed me. And you keep shooting lights out like that against really high caliber competition. You get into a groove of things. I mean, we haven't seen the best of Nate Heisey by any means. We haven't seen the best of Titan Anderson. We haven't seen the best of Bowen Bourne. I really want to see a lot from Cole Henry this year to step up and be. I honestly think he should start over James Betts. And who knows? Maybe you move that starting lineup around and put Titan Anderson at the 3 and. Maybe put Trey on that bench unit and have James Betts as a 4, Cole Henry as a 5. There's a lot of different things that can happen and a lot of different lineup changes. Like we've seen, Noah Carter stepped in and played that 5 spot last year. A lot of things can change. I am excited to see how this group evolves, what they do this season, and see them get into a groove and start winning some games and really impressing because, I say that I think they're going to place lower than 5th. But seed, we've seen it before. Seed really doesn't matter in the MVC tournament. They could be a tournament team. It's going to be tough without Fife, but I really want to see that, and we'll see what happens if Fife can make it back. So once again, folks, thanks so much for tuning in on this midweek episode of Corn Stalks and Sports Talk, hosted by me, UNI Insider for Town Square Media. Don't forget, before you go, subscribe, drop a comment, drop a like on YouTube, and then also subscribe, follow, etc. on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, all that, and on the KCRR app, KOEL app, all those apps, all of them. One thing we really need from you that really does, the best way to support this show is leave that rate and review on Apple Podcasts. It helps us out so much. So thank you for doing that. Once again, folks, my name is Eliot Clough, at Eliot Clough on Twitter. This was another midweek episode of Corn Stalks and Sports Talk.